On today's show, the Hawks hold serve and win at home, but it was not always easy. In fact, there was a lot going on in this game. Number one, the Hawks clinch a postseason berth. Number two, Jalen Johnson has a triple-double for the first time in his career. And number three, Malachi Flynn has 50 points for the Pistons. We'll get into all of that and much more on this podcast, and all of that is coming up right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1687 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening into Thursday. And today's show is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. And right now, if you're a new customer, get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet at FanDuel. And the place to go is FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Also, I should encourage you at the top of the podcast to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. That, of course, includes places like Spotify, as well as Apple Podcasts, and we're on YouTube on the video side. I should also plug a busy week already for the podcast, including a show that posted on Tuesday evening, I should say, into Wednesday, talking about Beat Krejci and mailbag questions and Final Four stuff, and that's all relevant at this point in time. But with all that out of the way, the Hawks held serve on this Wednesday evening with a win over the Detroit Pistons that we'll talk about in depth on this podcast. Big picture, they clinch a play-in berth. So a postseason trip for the Hawks this year. That was not always a total lock. Of course, it's sort of disappointing in some ways compared to where they were supposed to be a couple of months ago, but it was not always going to be this easy down the stretch, and they got there in the end. They're now staring down a game against Chicago in 2 weeks, either in Atlanta or in Chicago. We'll see on that front. They're now tied with the Bulls with 6 games remaining as far as the battle for the 9 versus 10 is concerned. But we are going to see a Hawks versus Bulls playing game in a couple of weeks, and we'll touch on that quite a bit in the coming days. But as for the game itself, it was pretty ugly for about a quarter and a half. Then the Hawks broke it open, led by as many as 22 points in the second half of this game, and then nearly gave it all away in pretty embarrassing fashion at the hands of Malachi Flynn and the Pistons. Flynn had 50 points, as we'll talk about much more coming in. For some context here, any win is a good win. I will be the first to say that. I, at the same time, like to give you the entire picture on this podcast. I've been covering the Hawks for a decade plus. This is what I do. But all that said, in some ways, a win is a win is a win. I'll firstly say that. Now, the Pistons are quite awful, honestly. They came in losing 9 of the last 10, not 10 of the last 11. They have the worst record in the NBA this year. They are now 13-63 overall and 6-31 on the road. Then you throw in the fact that Cade Cunningham, their best player, was a late scratch for this game. They were also missing a couple other rotation guys in this one. So the current roster that the Pistons had in this game was pretty dreadful in some ways. Now the Hawks are not healthy either. They're still of course missing Trae Young, Onyeka Okongwu, etc. But they've been a little bit healthier recently. Jalen Johnson's back now. Kobe Buffkin's back now. And through that lens, the Hawks were actually favored in this game at tip-off, according to our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, by 12.5 points. That's actually the biggest favorite the Hawks have been in a game this year. It was almost exactly the same situation as they had a week ago, literally one week ago against Portland at home, when the Blazers arrived with their G League team, basically. And while the Pistons did have Jalen Duren, they did have Jaden Ivey, Evan Fournier, Marcus Sasser. It was a pretty rough situation for the Pistons, so it's pretty similar to that. Only the third time all year the Hawks have been favored by more than 10 points in a game. And 2 of those games were against Detroit at home, which happened again tonight. So all of that said, the Hawks are supposed to win this game pretty comfortably. It felt like they probably were going to at different points in this game. And in the end, they won it by 8 points. And zooming out, you could say that that's all that matters. They held serve, they won the game. I would certainly agree with that sentiment, but we'll kind of dive in now to how they actually did it. So offensively, they ended up with a 116 or so offensive rating in the game. They had some positives on offense. They weren't fantastic, but they did enough. They shot almost 70% on 2-point shots in this game, which was by far their best attribute on either side of the floor in this contest. They also had 36 assists in this game. So the ball moved pretty well. They set up good shots at times. Some of that is Detroit being bad defensively, and they were really bad defensively at times. Also, the Hawks shot really well on long twos, kind of unsustainably. I think they were 8 of 12 on long twos. That's probably a number that you can't bank on. We'll come back to it later as well, but Jalen Johnson was excellent in this game with a triple-double, his first of his career. Hunter was efficient. There was stuff to like for the Hawks offensively, but they also had trouble on the margins. They had 16 turnovers in this game. That's a rough number. 15 free throw attempts, also a pretty below average number. And they were also below average on the offensive glass. So very little was positive outside of the 2-point shooting in this game. They got very careless in the fourth quarter, nearly gave the game away. It was within 5 in the final minutes or so. So really it was mostly just the shooting. But as I often say on the podcast, if you had to pick one thing to be good at, shooting is the one thing you want to be good at if you only have one option, and that's what they did in this game. Defensively, it was much more interesting, honestly more weird if that's possible, because the overall numbers for the defense in this game were actually quite solid. They had about a 110 defensive rating, which is something that if you told me that the Hawks would do that every night, you got to take that. That's a good number. But as referenced before, Malachi Flynn, a reserve guard from San Diego State, a former, a guy who was a prospect at one point in time, is now 25 years old, first round pick. Like, he's not over the hill, like he's an NBA player, but some crazy stats here. So Flynn has 50 points in the game. He becomes only the third player in the modern era of the NBA to have 50 off the bench. That's one thing right there. His previous career high was 27. His previous season high was 17. Also, he now has the lowest scoring average in a season for a player who had 50 points in a game ever in the NBA. He came in tonight averaging about 4 points per game for the year and had 50 points in this one. Now, credit to him, first and foremost. He was great as a shot maker in this game. Is that sustainable? Absolutely not, but he did it tonight. He was, I believe, 13 of 16 on twos and 5 of 9 on threes. Got to the line 12 times. He played very, very well. Clint said the same thing after the game. Like, it was certainly part of it was Flynn, but part of it is kind of embarrassing for the Hawks to allow that to a guy who is a role player to be kind off the bench on a bad team. So defensively, it was kind of a mess at the point of attack at times in this game, and Flynn took advantage of that all the way around. Other than that, not too much to talk about for Detroit in this game on offense, but there were still some big picture issues for the Hawks. They allowed 25 fast break points. The Hawks were generally terrible getting back the entire game, and it didn't burn them in the end, but that was a theme both during and after the game when watching the film. Also, they lost the turnover battle. They lost the free throw battle in this game. They didn't rebound super well on offense. They were pretty good on the defensive glass, headlined by Capella, who was awesome there, as was Jalen Johnson. But that was kind of the only bright spot on defense in this game. There was a huge split, by the way, in the starters for the Hawks versus the bench for the Hawks. In fact, Capella was plus 30 in a game. The Hawks only won by 8 points. So, and Murray was plus 20. So on-off splits were kind of there. It was magnified throughout the game. I'll just say this. Overall, it was a very super weird basketball game. The end result was kind of in line. So if you slept through this game or missed it or traveling or whatever, listen to the podcast. Number one, I appreciate it. Number two, you might just think, all right, Hawks won by 8 points, ho-hum. And yeah, in the end, that's kind of what the result was. But the Hawks, for me anyway, and there's no reason to sugarcoat this, they didn't play very well in this game. If they faced a better opponent, they might have lost. Or on the other side of things, you could say Malachi Flynn had the game of his life, which is certainly also true, then maybe it wouldn't have been so close. So I kind of get all the sides of this. I do believe, I have conviction, the Hawks did not play very well in this game, but the Pistons, as they were constructed without Cade and all that stuff tonight, are very bad, and that gave the Hawks a lot of margin for error. They took advantage of that margin for error in some respects to play poorly and still win, but they still won. So nothing is a given in this league. As the Hawks have said multiple times, as I've said multiple times, they've lost to the Hornets a couple times this year. Like, nothing is ever assured, but the Hawks had their biggest point spread advantage in a game coming into the night all year long. They didn't cover it, but they ended up winning. I wouldn't say comfortably. They were never trailing in the fourth quarter, so at least they were there on that front. But yeah, plenty to get to on this one. We'll have much more sort of a breakdown of the game and how it unfolded. At the end of the show, by the way, if you are a new listener, what I do is to go through all the players who appeared for the Hawks and give sort of my thoughts on all of them, how they played, how they fared, what they struggled with, etc., etc. Before we do all that stuff, though, and there's more to come, I promise you. But first, a word from our friends at Amazon Fire TV. Amazon Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, and they offer you amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs as well as the Fire TV Stick that you can plug into your existing TVs. They provide access to millions of movies and TV episodes as well as free and live TV. Whether it's baseball or basketball or other sports you might be interested in, you are going to want to have a Fire TV to watch all of it. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us, including me, at Locked On Podcast Network. Also, and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences are in the mix as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all the game analysis that you're looking for, as well as highlights and much more. Keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, from March Madness, college basketball stuff, NBA, MLB, football wins the season, and much more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos. It's all there for you as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices right now. If you haven't done that just yet, you should. Trust me on this. It's the place to go. And to learn more, visit amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. One more time, the place to go is amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The sports calendar is loaded right now, and FanDuel makes it even more exciting to get in on the action. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and right now, if you're a new customer, get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. That's $200 you can use to bet on college hoops or MLB, NBA, NHL, and so much more. But on all of your favorite basketball players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and much more. The app is super easy to use at FanDuel Sportsbook. They have everything we're looking for across the sports betting space. They have over-unders and money lines, point spreads, player props, future bets, and much more. And that includes the latest on the Hawks, of course, including the last for the next game on the schedule for the Hawks on Thursday, plus player props, futures, and the entire mix involving Atlanta. The app is safe, it's secure, and they cover the entire range of sports as well. College basketball, NBA, of course, prominently on this podcast. They have the NFL, college football, MLB, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and much more at FanDuel Sportsbook. And now is an awesome time to sign up with folks at FanDuel Sportsbook, and the place to go is FanDuel.com/lockedon. One more time, just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Okay, and to the game flow in what was again a profoundly weird basketball game. I will say this: Jalen Johnson returned starting lineup in this game for the first time since he came back from the injury. He stopped the 13-game run of Vit Krejci starting. Vit still played fine in this game off the bench, but he had been in the mix for a long time. And actually, Jalen got started early and often and was their best player in this game. Had a dunk almost immediately, and then had another one on the next possession after that. Hawks actually went up 13-4 in this one. The Pistons missed 11 of the first 13 shots. Detroit had 4 points in the first 5 minutes. And that was one of a few times in this game where I thought it was going to be a blowout. I really did. And then, of course, it wasn't. Capella, when he came out of the game, Bruno checked in, and it was kind of a downturn. It was not just only that, but certainly that was the theme throughout the game. Rotationally, it was the same in the first half of this game, really the entire game, as it was on Monday, other than Jalen starting and Vit coming off the bench. Only 9 guys played for the Hawks in this game. Off the bench, it was Bruno and Garrison Matthews, Vit Krejci, and then Kobe Buffkin as the backup point guard in this one. Bruno had 3 fouls in his first 4 minutes. They brought Capella back a little bit earlier as a result of that. Clip played more than he plays usually right now. In fact, Clip played 30 minutes. That is, I'm looking at this just to make sure I'm not crazy. Yeah, that's actually his second most in a long, long time. And number 1 was actually the game they went to overtime in. So his most in regulation in several months for Clint, which is partly because he was playing well, probably because Bruno was struggling, had foul trouble, etc. It was all kind of in the mix at one time. The Pistons did have a 14-6 run at the end of the quarter to get back into the game. The Hawks only scored 5-6 points down the stretch of that period. They did actually make a 3, Kobe Buffkin did. The Hawks were actually, though, combined with the Pistons, 1 of 14 from 3 in the first quarter. I made a joke in real time. I'll say it again now. The first quarter was not going to be sent to Springfield in this game. It was not a Hall of Fame-worthy quarter of basketball. It was pretty ugly. It got more interesting, though, as the game went along, unfortunately for the Hawks. So Buffkin had some nice moments in this one. He had a nice drive finish over James Wiseman in the second quarter. He had a nice step-back jump shot on the right side. He had a nice help side block, which I encouraged and sort of encouraged by defensively. Nice hit overall from him. The Pistons, though, took the lead briefly in the second quarter. Quinn called timeout after a particularly bad moment getting back on defense. Bruno was not alone, but he did not get back. Quinn was very upset about that. And as I mentioned before, that was a theme the whole game. The Hawks did not get back defensively all night long, and that definitely cost them different times. The Pistons had about 16 points in 5 minutes or so, and the Hawks were down 1, about 6 minutes left in the first half. Then they had a big run after that, 16-4, to kind of take control of the game. Capella absolutely obliterated Duren on a block at the rim and generally outplayed him the entire game. Jalen had a lob to DeJounte, kind of the inverse of what you expect there, from forward to guard for a dunk. Bogey had a 3 late, as did DeJounte, and they were kind of in control, up 9 at halftime. Capella had his season high with 13 rebounds in the first half He was very good in this game. DeJounte had 14 points, and the Hawks were shooting well inside the arc. In the third quarter, Atlanta went up by as many as 22 points. They were in control of this game. I will say positively, there was a monster stretch from Jalen Johnson in the third quarter. He had 2 or 3 super high-level passes that were fun to see. He had a 3. He had a good drive. Like, he was in total control of the game in the third quarter. And I have to say, Detroit's defense had some breakdowns that were kind of funny. They allowed Bogey a wide-open shot, 1 pass away, just for whatever reason. They had a breakdown there. They also doubled Capella in the post, which is something that I don't think anyone should do, even as a Capella advocate, as a weird defensive play by Detroit. They did so again, basically between the middle of the second quarter and the middle of the third quarter, the Hawks went from down 1 to up 21, 22 points. But from that point forward, it was not exactly smooth sailing for Atlanta. Detroit had a nice run late in the quarter to get back within 10. There was a nice 3-point play by Jalen Johnson to stop that run, and Kobe actually had a nice play, screening action to set up Jalen for that play. But the Hawks were up by 13 going into the fourth quarter. It was not fully safe. They got to Jalen's triple-double shortly after that. By the way, it was the first triple-double for the Hawks since November of 2022, which was DeJounte about a year and a half ago, so that's not a frequent occurrence for Atlanta, although I think Jalen will have many more in his career, if I had to guess, at this point in time. But that man again, Malachi Flynn, had 38 points with like 8 minutes to go, and it kept on coming from there. Now, it felt like the Hawks were going to pull away 2 different times. Once when they scored 5 points in a row to go by 13, I was like, all right, they're back in control of this thing, and they weren't. And then they went back to the starters finally, and it should have been easy from there, but it definitely was not. Flynn hit a 3, and the Pistons were within 5, I think 2 or 3 times in the last several minutes. Jalen Duren, though, threw one of the worst lobs you'll ever see in your life off the backboard. Hilarious play. Ended up with Capella getting a dunk on the floor, and it should have been over at that point in time. Up by 10 with 4 minutes to go. But it wasn't over. I am not going to go through all the plays for everyone's mental health because it was really, really rough from the Hawks. But if you want to be frustrated, watch the last 4 minutes of this game. On one hand, the Hawks were never in total disaster mode because they were still up by 5 or more the entire way through. But they kept opening the door for whatever reason. For example, Jalen had a turnover that was really bad. DeJounte had a couple of really bad plays, a bad shot, a bad turnover, missed a free throw. Like, it was equal opportunity. Everyone was kind of bad at the end of the game. They just didn't quite totally give the game away. But there were some flashbacks to early in the year when the Hawks had some leads and they blew them. Detroit, other than Flynn, who was definitely trying to cook at the end of the game, as he probably should have. But yeah, it was rough. The Hawks held on. They were never a situation where they could have been tied or whatever else. Like, they were up 5 or more in the whole fourth quarter. But if you watched it, you will certainly understand what I'm saying. It was on pins and needles at times in the fourth quarter. And nothing was at all easy. But again, full circle, the Hawks had several guys play well, as we'll get into in a second, especially headlined by Jalen and his triple-double, and Clint Capella, I would say, and Hunter. But it was also a situation where they lost the fourth quarter. They were really never able to pull away, which is kind of frustrating for a team that was up by 22 points. If you're up 22 points against this Detroit team and this version of Detroit in your home building, the game shouldn't be close at the end. That's kind of what I would say fundamentally about why the Hawks didn't play super well in this game, is that really the whole way through they had a couple of stretches when they played well, but the Hawks should have been in total control of this one, and they just weren't. And again, kudos to Malachi Flynn for carrying the Pistons offense, but it was too wobbly for my taste. Alas, they won the game. They held on for dear life, and that was the end of that. All right, we'll have more on the player stuff in a second, but first, a word from our friends at Robinhood. Today's show is brought to you by Robinhood. And did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from another retirement account with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gives you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Sub fees apply, and now for some legal information. Claim as a Q1 2024 validated by Ratings Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401k. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Let's keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. 3% matching on transfers subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, as a registered broker-dealer. Okay, before I dive into the player stuff in this game, as I mentioned before, 9 guys appeared for the Hawks in this win over Detroit. I do want to play you about a half of a minute of audio from Quinn Snyder. So I get asked every day, basically, about when Trae Young will be back. And I totally get that. He's the best player, he's the most valuable player on the team, and the Hawks have not been giving a lot of information on his timeline. About a week ago was the first official release update on Trae since his surgery, and all it basically said was that he's making progress and he's going to be starting some, quote, small finger motion exercises, end quote. That is the last on-record update of any kind from the Hawks, but tonight, Allison Mastrangelo of WSB asked Quinn pregame about Trae's status, and here's what Quinn had to say.
I know last week you gave us an update on Trae Young, so do you have any more about what he's doing, or at this point in the season, are you just hoping to get him back by the plan?
Yeah, I mean, he's got a program that they've put together with, collaboration with our health performance group and Trae, and trying to go through that return to play protocol. But the first thing that's got to happen is he's got to heal. And I know Garen's kept, to the extent that we can, kept everybody updated on that.
All right, so you can certainly see there that everything is very vague right now. So you listen to that. I don't think you know anything more than you knew before, if that makes sense. So I do want to say one correct thing. Number one, I'll play that for you just to get an idea of what we're dealing with when we're listening to this stuff, and people ask for updates, and that's all we have right now from Quinn. Now, I keep seeing some stuff on social media about like Trae having like a sprain or a dislocation or something. That's just not the case. He tore a ligament in his finger. And from what I was told, I said this on the podcast a month ago, there was risk of long-term damage without the surgery. So any attempt to kind of downplay the severity of the injury is pretty silly. I understand it's his pinky finger. He tore a ligament. That's a serious thing. He was in a cast for a month for a reason. He still has a very heavy brace on that pinky. I get it, but there you go. I don't have answers for you. I wish I did. The Hawks, as I talked about actually a lot yesterday on the show, if you missed it, another plug for that on the Mailbag show. The Hawks have generally just decided as an organization to not give return to play timelines. They only give reevaluations. I don't love that. I'm sure fans don't either. But as for like whether Trae will be back for the play-in, TBD is the answer. I've said since the moment he went down, there was at least a chance he doesn't come back. I said that day, and I wasn't trying to be pessimistic, but it's just the nature of the injury, all that stuff. That's still the case now. He may not play again this year, but we just don't know. So TBD on that. All right, to the actual player stuff from this game. We'll go to the bench first. It was not always pretty on the bench in this game. Bruno Fernando, I'll get this out of the way now. I like Bruno a lot. I think Bruno's given them some good minutes recently. He's obviously the third center, playing as second center right now with the Kongwu out. I thought he was probably the worst he's been in any game this year tonight. I thought he was awful, honestly. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Like, big picture, he just wasn't good in this game. Minus 22 is not all on him by any means, but in a game that you win by 8 points, to be minus 22 is hard to do, almost. Did have 3 assists and a block, had 4 fouls, 1 rebound, a couple just glaring mistakes, like just didn't have an impact at all in the game. Duren for Detroit, I thought was really bad in this game too, as a young, talented player, but his only good minutes came against Bruno, basically. So, it's one game. I don't want to make too much of that in any direction, but I thought in this game, Bruno really, really hurt them in the way he was not executing on offense and defense. Garrison Matthews had a weird game. So he had 9 points on 3 shots. He made all 3 of his threes. Great. 3 rebounds, no assists, all that stuff. Minus 17. I thought he played fine, honestly. It was just the bench units did not work, even with Garrison making all of the shots. Kobe Buffkin, 9 points on 4 from the floor, 1 5 from 3, had 2 steals and a block. 2 steals and 2 blocks and an assist. I thought Kobe's defense was really impressive, like lots of flashes in this game. I'm a believer in Kobe Buffkin. He looked good. The bench unit, him kind of creating with him on the floor, wasn't like necessarily his fault either. Offensively, it was not quite as good as it was on defense, but he had some nice moves, nice plays on the whole. I thought he gave them solid minutes off the bench. B. Krejci was the only bench player, I should say, in the positive and plus minus at a +6. 4 points, 1 assist. I talked about Veet extensively on last night's show, and I recommend listening to that podcast, but they have decisions to make about Veet in the future, about his conversion or not conversion or whatever on the playoff side. So listen to that show for a breakdown there. But I asked Quinn pregame tonight about Veet, and he gave a very positive answer about the way he stepped up, kind of out of necessity is the way he put it. and certainly that's the case. But I think Veet's still giving them good minutes. We'll see how much he's playing moving forward. He was obviously in a smaller role tonight, and while I'm high on Veet, you can't really argue with them starting DeAndre and Jalen Johnson. Those guys are just better than Veet. So that's the reality, and they started their best guys in this game, and I think that's probably going to be the plan moving forward. To the starters in this game. Mixed bag. Bogey had a rough one, to be sure. Now, on one hand, he made a 3 in his 84th consecutive game. That is the 9th longest streak in the history of the NBA, and it's still ongoing. So Bogey is in some rarefied air there. But he was 2 of 10 from 3, 2 of 5 on 2, so it was a rough shooting night for Bogey. He did have 4 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks, which is actually nice to see. But a rare night when Bogey is actually on the wrong side of the impact numbers. He's had great impact numbers all year long, plus minus, all that stuff. But tonight it was kind of a rough one for Bogey. Everybody else, though, starting lineup played at least pretty well. I thought DeJounte wasn't like his absolute best, but had 24 points, 11 assists. That's obviously pretty good. He was not good in the fourth quarter, as most guys weren't, but kind of rough a couple times there. But he was 8 of 13 on 2, so that was very helpful. 2 of 8 from 3. He played fine. Plus 20. Rough in the fourth quarter, but it's fine. DeAndre Hunter was super efficient in this game. 26 points on 16 shots. He was 8 of 10 from 2, 36 from 3, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. Did have 5 turnovers, which is actually way more than he usually would have. But he was economical in this game in a good way. Very productive. A nice DeAndre Hunter game on the whole. I thought Capella was once again quite good. Now, I said it on Twitter. I called my shot on this one. I was right. I'm in the building, of course, so I'm a little bit ahead of the TV feed. Clint missed a layup in ugly fashion. It was a bad miss. I'm not arguing otherwise. It should have been a make. But I tweeted that immediately, that's the kind of bunny that people will kind of react to. And it was true. Aside from that play, he was very good at this game. A game best plus 30 that I think he probably earned, honestly. He was the best rebounder in the game. He was the best defender in the game, in my opinion. Like, he was very good. And yet, I'm still getting replies now, several hours later, about Clint missing a layup. So it's the epitome of the Clint Capella experience. The last 5-6 weeks in a row, he's been very, very, very good. Now, earlier this season, he was not this good. I'm not saying he was. But, like, he has been really good for a long time now. And yet, he misses a layup, and that's all that matters. But I'm here to tell you, he played very well in this game. Plus 30, 16 rebounds, 11 points, 2 blocks. He was 5-9 from the floor, which is not great, but that's pretty good. The one bad miss was the only one that was really bad in this game. So yeah, I get it. I understand how frustrating it is. And by the way, it was a horrible missed shot. It happens. But kind of the epitome of Clint, and I would say top to bottom, but he was very good in this game. So I'll leave it there. And then lastly, Jalen Johnson had, you could say, the best game of his career. I'm not sure I'd go that far, but he was obviously the most productive he's ever been in his career. So number one, his first career triple-double. That's obviously awesome. I'm not the biggest triple-double guy in the world, but it takes a lot to get one, so there you go. He also had a career high, or at least he matched a career high with 28 points. He was very good there. He was efficient. He was 8 of 10 on 2s, 2 of 4 from 3, and got the line 7 times, made 6 of them, so he was very good as a scorer in this game. 14 rebounds. Not a career high, but obviously very, very good. Second most in the game behind only Capella, and he's always been very, very helpful on the glass. That will be the case moving forward. And he also set a new career high with 11 assists. So you do all that in one game, you can stop there. It's a fantastic performance. His passing really popped, I thought, at times in this one. It's always a skill that he's had, but I thought it was really good in this game. And then he also added in 4 steals and a block. And that combination of triple-double plus 4 steals puts you in some rarefied air, especially when you also have 28 points. So, like, it was a fantastic, standalone kind of stat line for Jalen Johnson. He was very good in this game. And yeah, I don't have much to add. Like, it's the future. He's obviously a monster prospect. He's already a really good player. And it was a showcase night for him in a lot of ways. So, unfortunately for Jalen, a lot of the national attention is going to be on Malachi Flynn, because 50 points from a bench guy is a bigger story, quote unquote, nationally. But Jalen was the best player on the floor in the game. Even with Flynn going absolutely nuts, I would argue Jalen was better. But I get the points thing, so whatever. But put that to the side. Jalen, in his second game back off the injury, was fantastic. And leave it there for now. So there you go. Okay, from here, the Hawks have 6 games remaining in the season. We are almost to the end. 4 of those 6 games are on the road, including a back-to-back with travel to Dallas on Thursday. So a pretty tough turnaround after a game that took a lot more energy than they probably should have taken tonight. They're going to play on the road in Dallas tomorrow. That game was actually rescheduled. So if you have a schedule that's old, it was supposed to be on Friday originally. Now it's tomorrow. It was rescheduled. Also, it was supposed to be a TNT game at one point, and now it's not. So it's going to be Thursday on Bally. It's an early game in Dallas because it was supposed to be a TNT at one point. So 7:30 Eastern, even though it's on the road. Dallas did just lose on Tuesday, but they are 11-2 in the last 13 games. They're playing very well right now. Also, they had the rest advantage in the game because they did not play tonight, and they're playing at home. So situationally, it's a very, very tough spot for the Hawks. Not only did they play tonight, but they had to kind of try tonight in a big way. Now they got to travel. Dallas was off today. Also, injury-wise, Dallas is missing a couple guys. Derek Lively is out, as is Josh Green. But their key guys are all playing. Luka, Kyrie, Daniel Gafford, etc. So a tough spot for the Hawks in some respects on the road on Thursday. I'm trying to find this now according to our friends at FanDuel. Yeah, right now, the Hawks are actually 11-point underdogs right now for tomorrow's game, which seems like a lot. I get that. But situationally, it's a brutal spot, and Dallas is healthier. They're playing really good right now, so that's an uphill climb to be sure. We will see. Also, if you remember, the first time these teams played this year, the final score was 148-143, and Luka had 73 points. So that was memorable in some unfortunate ways for the Hawks, but the rematch will be happening tomorrow. We'll see if the Hawks are at full strength or whatever. Well, not full strength, definitely, but we'll see if anybody misses the game tomorrow that played tonight, etc. And again, 6 games left, 4 on the road. The Hawks then go, by the way, from Dallas to Denver on Saturday for a very tough game against the champs, and we'll cover that game as we always would on the podcast as well. All right, I'll sign off now. It was a weird night all the way around. The Hawks got a win. Jalen Johnson got the triple-double. They clinched a postseason berth, because postseason includes play-in, playoff does not. I'll say postseason at this point in time. The Malachi Flynn game, all that. But hopefully you enjoyed this podcast, and hopefully you will subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple and Spotify. We're also on YouTube, so please share and like and rate and review and tell a friend about the podcast. I really would appreciate all the support on that front. Auto download, all that is appreciated. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there as well at BT Rowland. Follow my Patreon work at patreon.com/BT Rowland. I shared some audio tonight on that feed from not only from Quinn talking about B. Krejci, etc. Just some extra bonus stuff that doesn't always make it in the podcast. So that's a nice place to follow along with some more of my Hawks coverage. And subscribe to the podcast. Please tell a friend about the show. And we'll see you again about 24 hours after Hawks Mavs on Thursday. Stay tuned. We'll see you next time.